Well, thanks for Fed Talks for hosting this today, and Rick, thanks for joining me. I think with that, we'll just jump right in since we're already on the clock. So really, I would like to start off with what's the role of CISA in protecting our nation's critical infrastructure?
Well, thanks, and really appreciate being here this morning. This is a pretty cool venue. So my agency, the Cybersecurity and Infrastructure Security Agency, was established in 2018. We have been doing critical infrastructure protection security really for since 2003 when the department stood up, although in a different organizational construct, and really didn't have the focus because we had a bunch of other missions in our organization back then. But in 2018 in November, we got authorized to actually establish our agency, change our name from the National Protections and Programs Directorate to the Cybersecurity Infrastructure Security Agency. And what we do is we are a critical infrastructure security and resilience agency. And what does that mean? That means that we provide services and capabilities to critical infrastructure owners and operators, to state and local governments, as well as to other federal agencies within the federal government to enhance the security and resilience of critical infrastructure. We do that through two domains. One of them is physical. We've got a lot of physical security programs, and we do that through cybersecurity as well. And we have a vast amount of cybersecurity programs and services that we offer our partners to enhance the protection of critical infrastructure across the nation.
Thanks, Rick. And really, what you kind of highlighted is that broad landscape of the threat that's out there. So in regards to that, clearly there's a lot of different vulnerabilities and things that need to get protected. What are some of the priorities? How do you prioritize? What do you focus on first?
So our director, when we stood the agency up, laid out really 5 priorities for kind of the next 2 years, the rest of fiscal year 19, as well as fiscal year 20. And those are, rather bluntly, China, particularly with 5G and supply chain and the risk that China and other countries like China pose to really the information technology and communication sectors and their intent to leverage those sectors or compel those sectors to provide information and data to their governments. And so if you look at China, really their technology sector's an extension of their government based on their laws and their authoritarian structure that they have. So that poses a lot of concerns, particularly in the 5G with companies like Huawei as they're deploying technology and becoming pretty prominent in the 5G world and deploying infrastructure and things like that. So, I think in the United States, we're good to go. We've got the 4 big companies that are, not using that particular foreign-owned, so to speak, or Chinese-owned technology, and so that's a good thing. But we also have global companies that operate out of America. We have our citizens that are traveling to other countries as well that could be exposed, and so that's one of our priorities. Control systems, industrial control systems is another priority. We're in the process of developing a strategy and trying to bring together other parts of the interagency to focus specifically on control systems and the issues that the OT environment has because of the legacy technology and the legacy processes that they operate, and the physical the physical nature of a cyber attack happening and causing some type of physical catastrophic issue or incident. Election security is also one of our priorities, and will remain one of our priorities, particularly as we head into calendar year 2020 with the elections coming up. We're working very closely with the state and local community to make sure that we're supporting them. They administer the elections, and we want to make sure that we're doing everything we can to support them and ensuring that we have a safe and secure election and that 2020 is protected. We also are focused on our .gov, so we have a federal .gov mission. We work with departments and agencies, CIOs and CISOs to protect or help protect the government's networks and systems. On the civilian side, it's very much a partnership. They're responsible for the protection of those networks and devices, and we come in with technology and subject matter expertise to help them do that. We also have authority over those entities with regards to binding operational directives for patch management and things like that. So most of these binding operational directives have been public. We've pushed them out to the public, but we don't use those a lot. We try to be very measured and methodical when we push out a binding operational directive, and really want to work with the departments and agencies to cover down on risks to the federal networks and systems. And then the fifth priority is really soft targets, so crowded spaces. We have a lot of physical security programs around active shooter, counter UAS, and things like that.
So everything you described kind of gets back to really being able to assess yourself against all those areas. So when we're really approaching that from our point of view is we need to provide the resiliency to the critical infrastructure and those specific customers' needs. But then also it all starts with an assessment. So I think recently, at the end of April, CISA released the National Critical Function Set, which really provides a framework to kind of assess our critical functions, again, how those would support the different sectors that we have. Could you kind of talk to how that approach evolved from more of an asset to a function, to a sector to a function approach, and really what do you think the benefits would be to the supply chain and our businesses?
Yeah, so I think probably back in 2004 or 5 time frame into 2006, we were very asset focused with regards to critical infrastructure, particularly on the physical side. We had the buffer zone protection program, where we would give specific, grant funding to particular assets that were on some criticality list. And I think that we evolved that to really understand what the risks are within the various different sectors. Back in that time, there were 18 critical infrastructure and key resource sectors. Today, we have 16 critical infrastructure sectors. And so we were really, trying to figure out, what are those sector dependencies, what are the sector risks, which evolved into cross-sector risk and understanding, how does telecommunications impact energy, how does energy impact water, how does water impact power distribution? And so we started to form these other groups that were cross-sector groups to understand what the interdependencies were, what the cascading impacts were across industries. And then we evolved to really looking at critical functions. So what are those critical functions that underpin our public health and safety, the national economy, and our national security? And so we published those about I want to say a month ago or so, and rolled those out, and we worked very closely with industry. I want to emphasize the public-private partnership here with the development of these national critical functions. With critical infrastructure, security, and resilience, the government, we don't have all the answers. We've got to work very closely with our industry partners. It's incredibly important that we do that we listen to them, that we give them a voice at the table to help shape our planning, to help shape how we move forward with policies. My agency is, for the most part, a voluntary agency, so we work voluntarily with, or the private sector, I guess, works voluntarily with us. We've got a sector-specific agency structure that's set up so that we have a way to organize the various different private sector partners. But we also have other partnership models that are also important, particularly on the cybersecurity side, so that we can make sure that analysts in my agency are working with analysts in the private sector, and so that's very important as well, to make sure when there is a cybersecurity incident that we're able to get after the adversary very, very quickly, and we're not delayed by over bureaucratic kind of structures.
I think I really appreciate the 4 areas that the National Critical Functions has been broken into. It really helps with the conversation so people can understand how they would be impacted by those different areas, and they really are pervasive across all sectors. So I kind of think about my daughter when she has a lemonade stand. First thing she wants to do is connect through social media. She wants to promote her lemonade stand. The next thing she's going to do is there's distribution, which is me going to the supermarket to buy lemons, right? The next thing is when she wants to manage there's the whole management pillar of that, which is so people have to use infrastructure to drive to the lemonade stand so they can buy her product. And then finally, you can't make lemonade without water, so that's all about the supply. So I think it really provides a framework that you can apply to something as complex as a lemonade stand supply chain, as well as to any other business, to really show the cross-cutting functions that really impact every business. So, and water is something that impacts pretty much every business and in the supply part of it. But if everybody could, I really believe if you approach this with framework and just very simply align your business to those different areas, very quickly you'll be able to align and figure out the hot spots that might affect you. So I think it's a very direct way that really enables that conversation to be had at a very, anybody can have that conversation.
Yeah, I totally agree. I think, we have the national critical functions, and those are obviously very very strategic and very overarching. We do some backwards planning, and we can figure out by doing that analysis and doing that planning, what are the seams between what we think just by looking at it on its surface, what the risks are, or where the risks lie within a supply chain or within a particular asset, and it gets to this idea of criticality that I mentioned earlier. We were very kind of focused on these lists of critical assets, and I think we've evolved, and rightfully so, because there may be a small company that may not raise to the level of criticality, but they may be providing a product or service that's critical to a function. Exactly. And the visibility on that asset doesn't exist if you're just looking at sector, or you're just looking at just picking assets out of the millions of businesses we have inside of our country. So you've got to really do that that hard analysis and that planning to figure out where those seams are, where does the risk lie, and how do you apply your resources appropriately to make sure that those particular businesses understand where they fit within the national security fabric of our country. And really ask them to participate with us and do more with us in terms of sharing information, and so that we can understand what their vulnerabilities are, so that we can help them.
Right. It really highlights that it's an everyone problem, not just a sector specific. It's okay. So say energy or finance or other sectors are hardened to their degree. They still rely on those underlying functions that may be provided by other sectors to do business, and it really highlights that it's a problem that comes upon all of us to resolve together. And that's where that public-private partnership, as well as adding academia in to really understand where are things going to the future, and really being able to triangulate on how we can get ahead of this problem.
Yeah, no, I totally agree. I can't overemphasize enough how important it is for my agency to work with and have trusted partnerships with private industry, particularly on the cybersecurity side, where we are, we're trying to share, vulnerability information, cyber threat indicators that a particular company may have. And at the end of the day, some of this is about some of the services and capabilities we have to actually deploy to help, whether it's exercises, whether it's vulnerability assessments, whether it's vulnerability scanning, or incident response. It's really all about visibility. And so we have, pretty good visibility across the .gov. We don't have good visibility in the state and local .gov. We don't have good visibility necessarily in the .com, and not that we need that good visibility, but the private sector does, the state and local community does, and so we need to work very closely with them, because if they're seeing something in terms of a vulnerability or some type of new or unique tradecraft that an adversary may be using, and they share that information with us, we can take that information, anonymize it so that we can ensure that trusted relationship, and then share that with the broader cyber network defense community to cover down on that particular vulnerability, or cover down or let the community understand that unique TTP or tradecraft. And so that's very important. And likewise, I think that the private sector, as well as the state and local, we also have unique insights and unique information that we want to make sure that we're sharing and getting out so that we can raise the cyber defenses and the cybersecurity posture really of the nation. So
you just touched on the state and local governments and their roles in this. What should those state and local governments take away from recent events and about their specific exposures to possible adversaries?
Yeah, so we've seen in probably the last couple of years more focused attention from nation-state adversaries, particularly with ransomware, to attack or or cause some type of disruption at the state and local level. At the end of the day, the state and local governments provide a lot of very valuable services and critical services to their local populations or their state populations. And so those services going down causes a lot of disruptions. It could cause some fear in the local population. And so we want to make sure that the state and local governments understand the services and the capabilities we have. We want to work very closely with them to offer those services and capabilities. And we have started to really focus, obviously, on elections because the election infrastructure, that was designated a couple years ago is very important for our democracy, and we want to make sure that the state and locals can avail themselves of the services and capabilities that we have. But there's also a lot of other infrastructure that the state and local community either owns or operates, or they share a partnership with their local private sector industry within their state and local community. And we just want to make sure that they're leveraging the services and the capabilities that we have. We want to make sure that we understand what the risk profile looks like, so that we can actually adjust the services so that we make sure that we're hitting the mark.
Yeah, I think one of the key aspects of this is really a cyber-secure nation, then a cyber-secure state to a cyber-secure local government really equals cyber-secure for business. So businesses are, those environments promote a business-friendly environment. So a state and local government that is not as cyber-secure as might see their economic base drop off and some other challenges like that, those second and tertiary things that happen after the breach has happened and while you're in recovery, some effects that might not be felt for a long time. Does that conversation come into the risk exposure discussion? I know everybody wants to put together here's how we're going to address the challenge, but there are far-reaching effects that come into play. How does that discussion align to some of the risk discussions with the state and local level?
Yeah, so I think it definitely comes into play. I think, when you talk about the resource issues, when you talk about the complex nature of the state and local governments, and every state is different, and in a lot of cases, all the localities within a state are also different in terms of the laws and the practices that they have, the resources that are available to them to actually cover down on cybersecurity, the ability to hire and retain and pay cybersecurity professionals to be engaged and to work day in and day out to make sure that they have an appropriate security posture is a huge challenge. In a lot of ways, if you think about the technology, landscape is evolving very, very quickly. The threat landscape is also evolving. Our adversaries are becoming more persistent. They're becoming more bold in how they attack. But at the end of the day, they're also still using very simple tactics because those tactics still work. They're low cost and high yield. And so, training is another thing that we need to push. It's not all about just implementing technology solutions and having necessarily subject matter experts, but we need to make sure that state and local employees and federal government employees, and quite frankly, the nation, understands basic, simple cyber hygiene like patch management, complex passwords, what a spear phishing, is, what a spear phishing email is. So those are the basics that really everybody should understand. Your children at your home should understand that as well.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, and that's one of the things you touched on. There's not just one thing that's going to fix the challenge we face. It's not just artificial intelligence or machine learning. It's not just the workforce development. It's not the innovation and driving that into proliferating that across all businesses so they're more secure. Because you can't out-hire the cyber threat. That's so that you're never going to be able to hire all the individuals you need, and also then maintain the relevancy of your solutions. That's really, I think, where some of the as a service and having a make versus buy decision for your business or your agency really comes into play. Is you can't build it all on your own, so maybe they should consume things from providers that would really drive the outcomes you desire without being beholden to a tool that only one individual in your organization may know how to use, and when they leave, that starts to atrophy immediately. That's really the challenge we face across a lot of these. There's not enough people, so we need to do business differently.
Yeah, that's exactly right. There's certainly, a major shortage of cybersecurity talent, not only in America but globally. We need to put in place programs now. We actually should have put in place programs maybe a decade ago to actually, make sure that we've got strong K through 12 programs in school, so that we are, encouraging kids to enter into cybersecurity programs. I've talked a lot about, particularly with my international partners, about, how do we establish a trade school or a trade craft like electrical engineering and things like that, where you don't actually go to a university, but you can come out and enter into like an apprentice type job and then move up into a cybersecurity professional. It's a huge challenge for the United States.
Absolutely. Well, thanks, Rick. I appreciate your time today. It's been a great discussion and really value your insights. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you very much. Thanks a lot.